AM 740 K-Bright, AM 770 KCBC. Bottom Line with Roger Marsh and David Householder, looking at vouchers in Louisiana and new regulations at the LA Unified School District. And, of course, a new federal grant came from the federal government to the LA Unified School District, something like $15 billion. That's going to involve teacher training and new standards and all sorts of things. The question in Louisiana, of course, was the voucher system seemed to be working better than what they had, so why not expand it, which is what Bobby Jindal is maintaining. But our guest here for this segment is maintaining that the best solution is no government involvement at all.
Well, exactly, and we're looking at the LAUSD, and we're talking also here with Walter Block, who's a professor at Loyola University and a free market advocate, and at Loyola University in Louisiana. And Professor Block, as we look at Los Angeles right now, they're thinking about instituting all kinds of regulations, and the government itself is going to watch over the government schools to try to improve the government schools, because everyone says we have to reform education, so the government goes in and does it, and it creates a double layer of government, and the schools don't get any better.
Well, I think we've not learned the lesson from North Korea and South Korea or East and West Germany that socialism doesn't work. We have these almost experiments in real life, and we should have learned that government doesn't work in the economy, and it doesn't work in education, it doesn't work in farming, it doesn't work in anything. That government is best which governs least.
So when you get students coming up through the public school system and they end up in your class and you start talking like this, do they look at you like you've come from the moon or something? Because they've never heard this before, because they were brought up in this public school system.
Well, they get that from private schools, too. Everybody looks at me as if I'm from Mars, whether they're from public or private schools, because even private schools are not exactly free enterprise bastions. So I get that look wherever I go, and, I try to tell my students that the market is more moral than government because it's not compulsory. When I buy a newspaper from you, it's a voluntary sale. Mm-hmm. But when the newspapers say are publicly funded, they take it through taxes, which are compulsory. And it's more efficient. The market is more efficient because if you do a good job, you can make profits and expand your base of operation. If you do a poor job, you lose money and maybe have to go broke and go somewhere else. Whereas if the government does a bad job, and the government can do a bad job in many things, the post office, well, they never go broke. They just keep on rolling.
It's ironic, Dr. Block, as you mentioned the post office as an example, as they've been pulling away from the government involvement and still are tethered because of the requirements that they have for the contributions to the employee retirement, et cetera, et cetera. You've got a postmaster now who says if we can be completely free here, I think we can turn a profit. The only thing that's keeping them from being profitable
the government
is the
won't
government.
let them.
Yeah.
Well, FedEx delivers mail a lot cheaper than the government. We have sanitation services that are done privately much better than publicly. I have a book on privatizing roads and highways, which is a little radical, and I claim that 40,000 people die on the government roads, and if we had competition between road owners, we would cut that down.
Oh, no question. We have an annual Vietnam on the highways here. Seriously,
yeah.
And there's no protest.
Well, I would love to see how you'd pull that off, but that's for another.
We used to have private roads.
They're
called railroads.
We're talking education.
It used to
here.
work.
Let's get back on the right road here, talking about education. Dr. Block, you mentioned something earlier about the private schools still having some kind of, they still have some government influence. Are you making reference to the fact that a number of private universities, trade schools, et cetera, receive federal funding? In terms of
yes.
Yeah.
Student loans, that's the big one.
Yeah.
Yes, precisely. Student loans and sometimes research grants and this and that and the other. The government is heavily involved, and even a person like Milton Friedman, who is supposedly a free enterpriser, favors the voucher system, whereas what he should have done if he were a good free enterpriser was say there should be no connection between government and education at all, and vouchers are just a way of, in effect, making public schools more efficient, but we libertarians don't want public schools to be more efficient. What we want them to be gone because we should privatize them. If something is evil and immoral, such as public schools, we don't want them to be more efficient. We want them, to be privatized.
Well, you get that constitutional amendment going, and you can have your way.
Well, you wouldn't even. You'd need one in California.
You would.
In California, you would. So when you look at this, what do you think we should do? For goodness' sake, really, it's not a political problem. It's an educational problem. We have to teach America. We have to reteach America what its founding principles are, and we have to reteach America what a free society would look like, and why that would be better for everybody. And where do we start with that? You're an educator. Where do you start?
Well, I guess you start with education. You start with listening to people like Ron Paul or Ayn Rand, who I don't agree with on everything, but I think they're very people in the public sphere that make this point. We write books, we give speeches, we do radio interviews, and we try to convince people of the insights of Adam Smith about invisible hands being God's hand that leads us toward economic efficiency and morality.
Well, and there's this whole idea that if the government gets more involved, they're going to fix the economy. And of course, the public sector is over twice as inefficient as the private sector, according to most studies. And they continue to put an incredible drag on the economy. Now, if we look at economics, we were talking about this earlier, how the government wants to make everybody feel totally secure about everything, which lowers the sense of scarcity and demand. And that's precisely the problem we have right now. We have a lot of comfortable people who aren't really productive. And there's no sense of having to do anything. And what really drives the economy is that sort of hunger to get moving and get things happening. And everyone's complaining they're not hiring because there's no demand.
Yes, I certainly agree with all these quantitative easings, and all the government is doing is prolonging the depression that they created in the first place with the Fed, which gets us off a different topic. But, one of the problems with the present recession and depression is the Fed has artificially lowered interest rates, which has misallocated resources.
Now, are you familiar with this cartoon, this propaganda cartoon that came out from the Teachers Union? Did you
California
get a chance to
Teachers
see that?
Union out here, not the CTA, but there's a different. It's the one that's affiliated with the AFL-CIO.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the cartoon?
Well, Ed Asner, it just came out, and Ed Asner was the one who actually narrated it. And it's basically about soaking the rich, and it's a parable. It looks like Animal Farm. And it's all of these people and cartoon people. And what they basically say is it's the rich that have ruined this country, and basically what we need to do is give it back to the public sector.
Well, why don't they go to East Germany and North Korea or the USSR and do that? I mean, have they learned nothing from those spectacular failures?
Yeah.
This is just, although from Ed Asner, we would expect nothing else.
And the thing that I found interesting is you've got an animator who works on this, who's a member of this union, makes $139,000 a year in his job. Ed Asner is a multimillionaire actor. I mean, for crying out loud, with the VO he made for Up, I mean, I can imagine how much money he made.
He's getting stuff from Mary Tyler Moore still.
I don't understand, and this is something about us here on the left coast. I don't understand the number of people who are in Hollywood who are mega rich who keep playing the card of let's soak the rich, soak the rich, soak the rich. Obviously, if they're not going to be impacted by it, then they're going to be all in favor of it because they figure somebody else is going to get stuck paying for it. The system really has to unravel just on its own, and soaking the rich it doesn't help anybody.
Well, I mean, the rich, if you got your money not through government largesse, but through the market, every dollar that you got is an indication that somebody valued your service or product or whatever it was at more than $1. So if you're very, very rich, if you are Bill Gates and have several dozens of billions of dollars, this just shows that your contribution to society has been magnificent. Even, I don't know, say LeBron James, who makes 20, 30, 40 million a year.
Soak him.
He's doing it because he can put rear ends in seats to watch him play basketball.
He's a sales guy.
No, he's a fat cat billionaire. He needs to be soaked.
Well, Walter Block, you've been a delightful guest. We'd love to have you back on the Bottom Line again on our Free Market Thursdays. You just bring a great, fresh perspective to us, and we wish you well in your teaching.
Thanks for having me on your show.
We are continuing our Free Market Thursday edition of the program in just a moment as we're going to attempt to do something that hasn't been done before. We're going to attempt to explain Obamacare in 15 minutes or less. And what I mean by that, not sarcastically, but Austin Hill will be joining us in the next segment, and it might take a couple of segments to do this. But what's happening now that the president has won re-election is that Mitt Romney, of course, had campaigned on the idea that he was going to, repeal Obamacare. Well, obviously that's not going to happen. So states are getting ready. The states are getting ready for these insurance exchanges that they're going to have. Some states are doing a better job of setting up their exchanges than others, and it just so happens that Austin Hill is involved in the process at covering this, actually, for the state government in the state of Idaho. And he's going to speak into this for us and help us understand how the exchanges are set up, how they're going to work, and what a nightmare it's going to be for us as consumers having to work with these exchanges. I'm not going to lie to you, it's not pretty.
Everything you wanted to know about Obamacare, but we're afraid to ask. AM 740 K-Bright, AM 770 KCBC. This is The Bottom Line with Roger and House.
The Bottom Line.
AM 770 KCBC, AM 740 K Bright. Bottom line with Roger Marsh and David Householder. Every time I hear that song, I feel like I'm within that with that ABC special. You know, Santa Claus is coming to town. I expect Burl Ives to show up and all the puppets come take me away. But it's fun. It's great. And Merry Christmas to you here, even though it's December the 6th. We're celebrating. Not a lot of celebrating going on in North Carolina right now. Actually, the teachers union there, the Classroom Teachers Association of North Carolina, is pretty happy with this law. It makes it a Class 2 misdemeanor, which is the same as like resisting arrest. I mean, not a huge deal, but still could get 60 days in jail for a student to write inflammatory things about a teacher on a Facebook or to create a social media site like a fake profile and then slander the teacher, get pictures of them and Photoshop them and do weird things. What's interesting about this, though, is while the teachers union says good idea, there are 3 different organizations in North Carolina area that are saying not good idea. Now, you can imagine who the first one is. That would be the ACLU.
Well, politics makes for strange bedfellows, and this is one of those situations.
Yeah, ACLU, weighing in on this, their policy director, Sarah Preston, says, quote, this law is so vague that it could easily result in a student being arrested simply for posting something on the Internet that a school official finds offensive. Of course, if it's something about Christianity, the ACLU will be fighting for the union, saying let's throw the kid in jail, but that's a different story. Now, also, interestingly enough, your friends at the Cato Institute.
Indeed, and I am a member of the Cato Institute. So these are the kind of guys who see things the way I see them, and the reason they think it's a bad idea is they believe that school competition would take care of this whole problem, because it would be a voluntary association then, and nobody would be obligated to teach anybody who didn't want to. You go putting up websites on teachers, no, we don't want you in our school.
Right, you could do
See
that.
you later.
Well, Neil McCluskey, who's an educational analyst for Cato, says that the problem with the law is that the problem is real, but the way to basically he's saying the cure is worse than the disease.
Well, regulation is, you see, the problem is the more we have these monopolies and the bigger the public sector gets, the more we need regulation. So if the public sector takes over education or takes over as it's taking over healthcare, guess what we need more of?
Yeah, more regulation.
With the public sector, with that monopoly comes regulation. With competition comes less regulation, less laws. Imagine that, a free society.
What a concept. Well, not to be outdone, and this is what got our attention on this. The ACLU, of course, Cato got Dave all excited. Heritage Foundation, though, Jim DeMint, the new leader of the Heritage Foundation, basically saying that they're saying, okay, so the state is making it illegal to make a truthful statement. That's the danger here. Now, of course, the law is designed to protect the teacher from a kid saying, I got a lousy grade on my exam, so I'm going to make up this fake Facebook where it makes it look like my teacher drinks and goes to strip clubs and has, children out of wedlock and is just a horrible person, and we write profane things about him or her all over the place and just, really just slanders the person. That's what the law is designed to protect. But the concern from free speech activists and advocates is saying, what happens if you do something like a Rate My Professor where you say, I like this professor, but he's really tough, his quizzes aren't easy, and I only got a C, I don't think I'd take that test again. And they're saying, well, if the school says that that's harmful or offensive, then no, there's no go there. And that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen at all. That's the concern.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're looking at a situation here in North Carolina that needs help, and we need to work on it. We're also looking at a situation in Louisiana, which is really big news. This is making it all the way up into the courts, and what's basically happened is there's a kid named Gabriel Evans, and Gabriel Evans was going to one of the worst schools in the country, and Louisiana's got its fair share of worst schools. And because of all the disaster with Katrina, they kind of loosened up the rules for school, and Bobby Jindal and some others put through a voucher system saying, hey, here's vouchers, go to whatever school's open and try to make it work. Well, it turns out this saved Gabriel Evans' life. His whole life turned around because he started going to a Catholic school with higher standards, and he just blossomed as a person. And now the teachers' unions in Louisiana say, we want to reestablish the monopoly.
Well, this all began, of course, during Katrina, and you saw that the governor went in for this kind of emergency, we've got to get some vouchers, because they literally, schools were gone. They were gone, and it didn't happen for them to continue because there were certain. You saw stories about there was a football team. I know a high school football team that the school was pretty much destroyed, and a couple of rival schools. It was a great story. A couple of rival schools actually had to get together and form a team, and so these boys who were just bitter rivals, and they'd grown up, it was SC, UCLA, Ohio State, Michigan type of rivalry. In the aftermath of this, because of the vouchers, one school was still standing, so the other kids got to go to that school. And you started seeing public-private hybrid things just because it was functional. Well, all of a sudden it worked, and it was going very, very well. So Governor Jindal says, well, you know what? We need to expand this program because for us, and again, what we have said here on the bottom line is we see the voucher system working in certain areas, but not as a statewide mandate. You got to take it from week to week, or from you got to take it from district to district. So here's this one student in this one school where it's working great. You're talking about a life-saving situation for them.
Mom is thrilled. So this has been the biggest difference of his life ever. And now the teachers' unions are coming back and saying, hey, this voucher system wrecks the public schools and it wrecks our monopoly. Well, they don't say it that way. What they're saying is, what's the point of having public schools if you just give these vouchers out? And Catholic schools get the same money from the state as we do. That's not fair. We're the public schools. We should get all the public money. And we should preserve this sort of this monopoly that we have.
Yeah, we should. Well, that's what the public schools are saying, and so the issue is, do we have them or not, and are we going to be able to do this?
Well, it went to court, and unfortunately, Gabriel lost. And it turns out that these kids have to go back to the public school now. And this is really, really challenging for the whole thing, because it was an experiment that was actually working in a state where the schools were really, really challenged in a big way. Well, we have with us here Walter Block, and we'd like to talk about the whole university system and how that works. Walter Block is a professor at Loyola University in Louisiana. And of course, public universities have a big subsidy, too. And we've talked about that before here on The Bottom Line. Welcome to the program, Walter.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Good to have you. You were just in Australia, I understand.
I was indeed, yes. I walked upside down.
Not exactly the kind of place you go on a short trip, but you came back quickly.
Yes. It was a quick in and out, a couple of speeches.
Now, you're a professor at a private university, and of course there's many, many public universities, and public universities, of course, get a major subsidy, so it creates a real challenge for private universities when they're trying to compete.
Yes, when they're giving it away for free down the street, it's harder to compete than when they aren't giving it away free down the street.
So if you were in charge of the whole university system, for instance, Louisiana, what would you do to make it more excellent?
Well, my motto is if it moves, privatize it. If it doesn't move, privatize it. And since everything either moves or doesn't move, we privatize everything. I see government involvement in the economy as socialism, and I apply it widely to everything. Certainly education. I don't see why education should be in the public sector. I think education, the relationship between government and education should be roughly the same as the relationship of government and bubblegum or government and shoes, namely no relationship at all.
Well, if you don't have the government regulating bubblegum, our teeth might fall out, and that wouldn't be a good thing.
I don't think so. I think the FDA is a monopoly regulator, and we'd be much better off with private certification agencies. They screwed up with thalidomide and the FDA, and then now what they do is they prevent new medicines, and they don't let people in the last dregs of their life dying from cancer even try experimental drugs.
Oh, it's true. I, as a pastor, run into that all the time. We're going to continue talking with Walter Block here about privatization, about schools, about education, and about how, once again, the theme for today, the Free Market Thursday, is that if we let the public sector take over something, then we have to regulate it on top of that, and it creates this just morass of stuff. AM 740 K-Bright, AM 770 KCBC. This is The Bottom Line, California's voice for faith and freedom, life and liberty, with Roger and House.
The Bottom Line.